Hey guys, this is Dave from Orchids and Fynbos, and today I have a little bit of a different type of video for you guys. So Nina from Ninja Orchids is running an amazing new series called the CareCollab, and essentially she's asked growers from around the world to document the same orchid at the same time in their different regions. So essentially the idea here is to see how the different orchids compare in the different regions and under the different care conditions, and to also see the different stages that orchids are in. So some will be in seedling form, some of the orchids will be in flower at the time. So I think it's an amazing idea to basically see how the orchids are growing around the world in different places. And I also think it's a brilliant idea, especially with the current times that we're in, where we can share and have fun together and across the divides. So today I'll be sharing with you the Myrmecatavola Frances Fox, used to be Recchara Frances Fox. I'm going to be doing this collaboration with a few other people. You will see them down below in the description. We have Nina from Ninja Orchids, we have the Orchid Doc, and we have Karin's Orchids. So please check the links in the description below and check out their Myrmecatavola Frances Fox. So I've had this orchid since about mid-2018. I was very excited when I purchased it from Plantain. It was a small little orchid, but as you can see, it looks absolutely amazing. Let me show it over here. So this is, that's basically like almost 3 years on, and you can see these awesome roots that she's developing and all the new growths. I have 1, 2, that was a newish one. This is a third new growth that recently came out. So I have about 3 new growths on the orchid at the moment. And I just wanted to talk a bit about how I care for this Recchara, and what media I use and the light levels and all of that type of stuff. So to start, I probably want to talk about the potting media that I generally use. So depending on what I can find around at the time when I am repotting my orchids, I usually go for a bark mix. Generally it's the cocoa husk that I use in my orchids pots. This one, as you can see, had some normal orchid bark at the time, some fine orchid bark. I think I actually repotted this when I received it. No, I would have repotted it. So yeah, but what I will be doing soon is, as you can see, this one's outgrowing her pot, so I will be repotting it at some point soon. It hasn't bloomed for me yet. It is, I think it's still a seedling, but yeah, I expect it to bloom probably in the next year or two, maybe, hopefully. And essentially what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be potting the orchid up into this pot over here, where I probably won't remove it from the current pot, but what I'll rather do is I will be potting it inside here as not to disturb the orchid, so that the new growths get enough moisture and things like that, and I'll pot it inside the media. So as I said, what I will be using is the cocoa chunks. Then I'll always pot my orchids up in a mix of cocoa chunks and perlite generally. And then sometimes I'll add the sphagnum moss. At this point in time for my Cattleyas, I don't really add sphagnum moss to the mix. To be honest, they generally don't need it. They do quite well. And I always pot my Cattleyas up in a clay pot. I find that when I use the cocoa chunks and perlite in a plastic pot, it's generally too moist for the orchids, even in the greenhouse. As you can see, we're in a greenhouse at the moment and it's quite hot here in South Africa, but in the winter it can get quite cold, and generally I find that the Cattleyas, when they are potted in up in a plastic pot with this mix. It's generally too wet in the winter. My other orchids, I can use this mix in plastic pots like some of the Oncidiums and stuff, but for the Cattleyas I generally plant them in a clay pot with this mix, and it works very nicely through the winter and through the summer. And I only need to water about twice a week in the summer for the Cattleyas, and once a week, maybe once every week and a half in the winter, so even in clay pots, so that works quite nicely for me. So yeah, but less about the potting at this point in time. Let's talk about the orchid. So I'm pretty sure that someone in the group will be having a Myrmecatavola Frances Fox that is in bloom, so again, check those channels out below. But it has beautiful yellow and red blooms with dots on, and I can't remember what the cross is, but I know it's the Cattleya Brassivola cross. So Myrmecatavola, it would be a it would be a Brassivola cross. So they usually end up being those bright colored flowers with those speckling on the lip, I think it is. And yeah, the color changes usually between an orange, yellow and red depending on the stage of the flower, but they're absolutely beautiful. I'm not going to insert a photo because this is more a CareCollab, but again, mine hasn't bloomed yet, but again, I'm sure one of the other channels will have a photo of these of the orchid. So my little one, just to give you some history about it, it was a little bit set back soon after I got it. I've actually been struggling with scale in my specific climate and where I'm staying. Usually you would think scale isn't much of a big issue, but especially with the Cattleyas for some reason, and mainly the seedlings and orchids that are set back, the Cattleya types that are set back, it actually ravages my orchids, and actually I've lost quite a few Cattleyas because of scale. So I'm now at a point where unfortunately I have to use insecticide for most of my collection, which I don't want to do, but I have to do if I want to keep orchids. And usually it will hide between the sheath of the orchid. So as you can see over here, these white sheaths of the orchid, it will usually hide in between there. So I treated this one about a week or so ago, so there shouldn't be any scaling at the moment. I'm trying to see if I can pull one of the sheaths off. No, there doesn't seem to be any scale on it at the moment, and it's looking quite healthy. After I treated it the last time for the scale, it does look like it's been doing quite happy at the moment, essentially. So yeah, she was set back, but now she seems to be very, very happy. And as I said, the latest new growth that is almost full or fully formed is this one, and it's looking a lot bigger and a lot healthier, plump and happier than the other pseudobulbs from the past. As you can see, I had some quite shriveled pseudobulbs from the scale, and this little baby over here, you can see it's not really formed properly, because again that one was attacked by scale at the time. But yeah, less about the bad, let's talk about the good. Okay, so a few other things I want to talk about are the light levels, the watering of the orchid, I'll briefly touch on humidity, and then also about pests, specifically again the scale. I actually noticed there is another orchid in this greenhouse that needs to be treated, so I'll briefly show you what I do for treating for scale. And yeah, so let's carry on. So the light levels, so as you can see, this is in a greenhouse, and our climate is quite hot. We can go, I think, up to about close on to 30 odd degrees Celsius here in South Africa, so it can get very, very hot in this area. The greenhouse is in full sun for the summer, and in the winter it's probably about well, most of the greenhouse is covered by the house in a small little place, so it doesn't get much light in, or much direct sunlight in summer, but it does get bright light. And then this area of the greenhouse still does get morning sun in summer. I have quite a few Cattleyas that flower well here, so just in case you're wondering about the flowering, again, I think it's because it's a seedling. The Cattleyas do flower very well in this area. I have my purpurata, which Laelia piperata, which flowered amazingly this past spring. And then yeah, so light levels, that's pretty much what I have. The shade cloth I have on here is I think it's a 50% shade 50% shade cloth. I'll put it in I'll put it in a little with a little insert what percentage it is, but I basically doubled over the shade cloth. It's a green colored shade cloth, because yeah, it gets too hot here in summer, otherwise for the orchids otherwise. I have a what you call it, a solar powered extractor fan in the greenhouse, because again, it's a tiny greenhouse. It builds up. It can actually get to, if I don't have the fan on, it can get up to above 40 degrees Celsius, so it's very hot in here. And even with the fan, and I've got another vent, and I have an actual fan itself blowing air on the orchids, even with those conditions, it still gets too hot for some orchid types. I'll briefly touch on zygos coming up in a care video, and they can't live in here. It gets too hot, or at least in summer. I've got one in here at the moment, but I must check on that one. And also I've tried Promenias in here, don't do well. I'm trying to think what else. There are certain Cattleyas that also don't like it in here because it gets too hot. But generally, otherwise, it's okay. So yes, this is essentially my hot greenhouse. My cooler greenhouse, I would say, is the indoor grow room, which I'll touch on in other videos. Okay, so that's the light. The humidity in here, it can get pretty humid. At the moment, it isn't humid. It's 40%, but it probably doesn't drop much lower than 40% in summer because of the greenhouse. In winter, it can go up to 70% humidity, 60 to 70 usually, obviously depending on when and how often we water. Then the watering, as I've said, in winter we do about once every week and a half. In summer we have to do it twice a week generally. And as I've said, what I do is I switch between the plastic pots for some orchids, and then for the Cattleyas the clay pots, because they are obviously more, they can the roots can breathe better, and they can be obviously drier than the Oncidiums, for instance. So that's kind of what I play with my mix. Yeah. And then the last thing, as I said, I wanted to touch on is the scale and my general pests, how I treat them. So let me just give you a bit of a demonstration here, a very short one. Here I have my BC Maikai, which isn't in the greatest condition. It's also attacked by the by scale. So you can see, I'm going to try and show this to you. Don't know if you'll be able to see in there. There, that one. I'll try and get an image if I can't get it clearly. But you can see inside those leaves you have some scale. We also have scale along the top here of the leaf, tip of the leaf. And then we also, you just see at the bottom here. If I pull the sheath back, it's probably going to be a bit of a nightmare. Let's see. This one's been doing okay. This one gets tapped quite often, so I do, yeah, there you go. Let's see if we can get an image of that. Okay, so I'm going to try and get it to focus. There, you can see over there, I've pulled the sheath back, how the scale attaches. So this one's been doing relatively okay. It does get attacked quite often. So I'm not going to show you the full treatment, but essentially I will use a product by Effecto called Aphicide Plus. So this is the product. Okay. And then I will obviously follow the dilutions on the product, and then I will essentially use that to treat the plants. I usually use that probably once a month, once every 2 weeks, probably more like once a month at the moment. And I was starting with just a few plants that are affected, but I'm somewhat moving towards my full collection because it's a bit of a nightmare with the scale at the moment. It's doing, as I said, sorry, I'm actually doing quite well. I'm keeping them at bay, but it does pop up sporadically on the plants. So, and usually when I do see it, it's a bit too late because they're hiding behind the sheath. So I generally try to keep on top of the treatment at the moment. My only concern is I really love the jumping spiders, and this greenhouse is infested with them. I actually love it. I know a lot of people are scared of spiders, but I actually love them. I've got a lot of different types of jumping spiders that I've seen, little tiny red ones, not spider mites, they're bigger than spider mites, and a whole lot of other different types of spiders. And essentially I'm concerned that the insecticide might kill them, but it's a choice between, you know, having the orchids or having the spiders at this point in time, which is not a nice choice to make, but it is that case. So what I do generally, if I can, I don't try, as I said, I try to use the apicide less and only on selected plants, but what I generally try and do is I have a 50% propanol and water solution, which I basically just liberally spray on the plant when I see it's a minor infection like this. So I'll spray inside all the crevices of the orchid. Try not to get too much on the roots, but I do try and get down to the base of the plant. And I know this works very well on the mealybug, and I think and I hope I have had quite a bit of luck with this actually. I do think that it does kill the at least when the scale's in its woolly form. The harder scales though, I usually have to then go with my hands and just, you know, scratch it off, and by doing that then the ethanol gets under the to the underside of the bugs. So I also just usually try and pull off as much of the sheath as I can, trying not to drop it elsewhere in the greenhouse, just spread, because we don't want to spread the infection. With the scale, if it's a seriously bad infection, I usually separate the plants, because there's so many of them getting scale at little times here and there. I don't have space to separate all the plants, unfortunately, from each other. So if it's something mild like this, I will usually just leave it with the other plants in the collection. And I also know that my Cattleyas get scale quite often, so that also I also end up just watching them quite well. And yeah, that's pretty much what I do, and then it will go back into its collection, or at least back there with the other Cattleyas. With newer plants, I definitely do separate and quarantine them in the inside grow space. There's a special dedicated area for all the new plants, and I'll watch them, and otherwise then I will start, once they're doing okay, I will introduce them into this collection. So I do try and keep this one under more control. And that's, yeah, as I said, that's generally about it. So that was my little care video on my Myrmecatavola Frances Fox, with a few extra details about my collection and how I manage pests and the light levels of the Cattleyas, etc, etc. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave any comments below, any questions you have. I'm by no ways the most experienced grower out there. I'm pretty much more of a newbie, I would say. I've been keeping orchids for the last 5 years, I think. I'm not a newbie, but I mean, yeah. and yeah, so if there are any questions, just give me a shout down below. Again, please go and check out the other channels. That's the Orchid Doc, Karin's Orchids, and Ninja Orchids. Please go and check out their channel for their Myrmecatavola Frances Fox. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button. Please subscribe for more videos. Keep well, keep safe. Bye guys.